come up in the discussion group? Qualities that have inspired them from the mentors and teachers they've had. I know I was with Toril and Christina. We talked about a few.
I can.
Please, Hiba.
Yeah, we were discussing something really interesting that already you mentioned in the session about, the deep listening. This deep listening, without having, any agenda or without having, any different thoughts, just really focusing, with provide the other person being in the safe zone. So, you can reach the other and you can guide him really with with honesty, and the message will arrive and it will be very powerful. This is one of the things we really discussed, and but mainly it's these 2 points: the deep listening and the safe zone that. And another thing that modeling about, for example, a person, if he's this teacher or whoever is talking personally about something in a vulnerable way, in a very honest way, and experience that he really lived, not something he's giving advices that he's just anything, and being something he really lived, that you see that you can model, or it's similar to your own stories.
Yeah, as you were saying, I think walking the talk is so important, that we when we try to share with others. And one of the other things that, to add, Hiba, that I was just thinking about, this point that we discussed is when we talked about the mentor being one who places the interests of the students before their own. Because I think a lot of times when we give advice, it's based on, okay, what would I do? But then it's a total different, when you were talking about that really deep listening, okay, deep listening, but also, okay, what is best for them in the situation they're in, and not necessarily what I would do in that situation. I think it's a small thing, but I have to also always catch myself in that situation. And it comes up very often for me, because I'm always giving advice to parents or kids, like in the role of work, but then to step out and say, okay, this is what I would do, but then also like, okay, what is the best for the person in this particular situation, which may not be necessarily, again, it might be their 1% or their next step, right? I may want to take a bigger step, but for them, they may, be only ready for, something smaller. But to kind of listen in that space of, looking at what's best for them in that situation, I think that's also something that for me has really differentiated, just people who give general advice and the people who deeply listen and give very specific advice. That's, for me, rather than just the general advice. I'm not sure if anyone else can relate to that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ricken. As a teacher as well, I could relate to parents coming and asking, okay, what do I do with my children? And like, I don't have children of my own, so I really need to listen to their environment and who they are, their culture, and then try my best to even give a little bit of advice by being that deep listener. So yeah, that's a very good point. I really liked how my partner said creativity as well, from her mentor, someone that inspires creativity, because looking into our world, actually, I think our creativity is the one that is most attacked or assaulted in many different ways, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, through various social institutions, which is unfortunate. So like creativity is linked to our creative power, our creation, and the mentor that can bring out that part in you is a good mentor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Livia. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments?
If I can talk about my partner, Livia, but unconditional love, that quality in any mentor. So of, deep listening advice, I think if someone truly has unconditional love for us, then all of the rest just kind of falls out because they believe in us, they listen to us, they are there for us despite anything. And to have someone in your life that truly can display that quality, I think that is, I guess, the supreme quality of unconditional love.
Yeah, it's, the wisdom, the yoga texts, they specifically talk about when we reveal our mind and our heart in confidence, it's not just to anybody, it's one who, really wants us to achieve our best potential and has our back, right? And these, again, to me, it speaks to what you were talking about, Tiffany, with, this loving aspect is that, we go to we share with a lot of people, but the people we should really be striving to share with are the people that we genuinely know that, want to see us achieve our best potential, will help us get there. And in that way, we also are willing to accept sometimes constructive criticism, right? Which is not always easy to hear, but it's necessary for all of us, right? But when we know that safety is there, that support's there, that love is there, someone can say anything and we'll be ready to try to own it as best as we can, because again, it's not coming from a place of superiority or judgment, right? So thank you, Tiffany. It's such a wonderful point that you brought out here. All right. So the third element that I wanted to touch upon before we end today's session is this last one, is the environment. And this is the third manifestation of the universal teacher, is the environment. And if everyone is open, we'll read part of this section from this book. Is really incredible because we're going to go through a lot of different elements of nature, and we're going to learn different lessons through this. So I will start, and then if someone wants to follow along, they can also contribute to the reading as well. The third manifestation of the universal teacher is the environment, which is overflowing with wisdom. Water, for example, teaches us fluidity and adaptability. The past teaches us humility. Stillness and silence teaches us clarity. Young children teach us authenticity and playfulness. Our teachers are everywhere. They speak to us through all things. We hear their wisdom in our heart. Suffering is an important teacher too. Many of us spend our whole life running away from it, but suffering deepens us, teaching us compassion, empathy, and non-attachment. Most people move through at least one period in their life marked with intense difficulty and pain, often acknowledging in retrospect that it was a period in which they learned the most about life and even about death. In facing the multifarious deaths that arrive, with the dark night of the soul, we're pulled into realms of understanding that might not be readily available during prolonged periods of carefree comfort. Krishna tells Arjuna in the Gita that he is death, and in doing so reveals how we can understand the dark night of the soul to be a manifestation of our inner guide as well. It took me many years to begin appreciating the environment might actually be supporting me at all times. To aid my understanding, my teacher told me about a powerful a king named Yadu, who crossed paths with a young and effulgent Brahmin or priest of sacred learning while traveling through his kingdom. The king approached the Brahmin and said, "Dear Brahmin, although all people within this world are burning in the great forest fire of desire and greed, I see that you remain free and aren't burned by that fire. You are just like a mighty elephant who takes refuge from a blazing forest fire by standing in the cooling waters of the Ganges. Please tell me how you became enlightened so I may learn from you." Does anyone else want to read? Okay,
I'll read.
Oh, please, yeah, Stacy, go.
Now that I've found the spot, it's really hard with the Kindle. Like there's no page numbers. So the Brahmin replied, "I have learned from 24 different gurus. They include the earth, wind, ocean, honey thief, hawk and arrow maker. By taking their lessons to heart, I have attained complete freedom from suffering. The Brahmin then explained that King Yadu what he explained to King Yadu what he had learned from each of his teachers. I observed that the earth provides for everyone's needs, he said, even when humans plunder her resources, turn her lush forests into wasteland, and soak her surface with blood in the most savage of wars. From the earth, I learned the quality of tolerance. Similarly, the trees of the earth give their bark, roots, fruits, leaves, wood, and shade without any expectation of return. This taught me the quality of dedication to others. It taught me to make the welfare of others the sole reason for my existence. The Brahmin continued, the wind travels everywhere, sometimes passing through a waterfall, a fragrant sandalwood forest, or a crematorium. The wind crosses dark and forbidding places, yet remains unafraid. It carries the aromas of different locations, but remains unentangled and undisturbed. From the wind, I learned that while we may find ourselves in challenging and troublesome situations in life, we can remain fearless and undisturbed, thereby transcending good and bad. From the ocean, I learned that whatever life brings our way, we should remain undiminished in who we are. During the rainy season, the rivers rushing to the sea are overflowing, and during the summer, they dry up. But the ocean always remains unmoved and inexhaustible. Similarly, a wise person is never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulties. She remains at peace, whether she meets with success or failure. This is because she doesn't seek her identity in those things. Therefore, they don't define her.
Someone else want to read? I will go back to reading. The Brahmin continued, one day I happened to see a person in the forest breaking open a beehive to collect all the honey that countless bees had spent their entire lives producing. From this, I learned about the dangers and futility of needless accumulation of capital, which simply creates greed, danger, and fear. Human can be like bees who struggle to produce a large quantity of honey, which is then stolen by a more powerful capitalist for his own enjoyment or benefit. If our wealth is not lost during our life, death will in the end surely take everything from us. I concluded that I shouldn't make the amassing of capital an end in its own right. Rather, the primary purpose of wealth is to help others. One day I observed a group of large hawks in flight, unable to find any prey. The hawks suddenly joined forces to attack a weaker hawk that was carrying some meat. The weaker hawk soared, dodged, and dove to save itself. At least the weaker hawk, its life in peril, gave up the meat it was holding on to. And at that moment, it was freed from misery. Seeing this, I understood that humans form deep attachments to objects and outcomes, which they believe will make them happy. But these attachments are a source of suffering. As soon as we relinquish our possessiveness and attachment, we become liberated. Another time I observed an arrow maker at work. Suddenly, drums, trumpets, and other musical instruments could be heard as a large procession approached. Despite all the commotion, their arrow maker was so absorbed in his work that he didn't even notice the king who passed right next to him. This filled me with wonder. Most of us, I thought, are continually distracted by the commotion of daily life. If we could practice yoga with the undivided focus and absorption of the arrow maker, how our life would be transformed. In this way, I learned from 24 different teachers. I took their teachings at heart and began applying them in my own life. This is how I attained enlightenment. Hearing this, King Yadu accepted this effulgent and fearless Brahmin as his guru. The king developed the same qualities as the Brahmin and began ruling his vast kingdom as a philosopher king. I learned from this story that there is beauty and perfection in all things. If we're awake to the voice of truth, if we hear that voice speaking to us through all things, we realize that the environment is always friendly. It is not hostile. A person committed to the path of yoga perceives opportunity all about her, even in times of difficulty. As William Shakespeare eloquently put it, sweet are the uses of adversity, which like the toad, ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel in his head. In every challenge or difficulty, a precious jewel awaits us. Most of us see only the outer form of the circumstance and never look for the hidden jewel. We are unable to see it because it lies in a direction we often don't look. within. Any reflection to share from that amazing section?
Yeah, I have some questions, comments.
Please, Johnny.
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. Materialism, my preoccupation with playing the game of capitalism, it causes me to suffer quite a bit, and it can take a lot of the joy out of life. And yet it seems like in the society that we live in, it seems like a necessary part of living in this society. And how do we not get attached to playing these capitalistic social games? How do we play these games in a way that's not attached, and in a manner that's in service of spirituality and our dharma, our purpose? I can lose sight of that quite easily, and if I'm not careful, I can become preoccupied with climbing social hierarchies, seemingly holding on to my supposed status, and being fearful of losing what I have, even though it's inevitable in the end that I will lose everything that I have.
Yeah, it's such a powerful point that you're making, Johnny, and I'm sure one that we've all thought about along the way. I'm not sure what other people think. I think for myself, it requires a really, really strong moral compass. And Johnny, I'll just share a slide that we were talking about earlier, which might hopefully shed some light. But this yoga system, it has this, it has this 3-point decision-making system that I think also can speak to, at least for myself, how I've also been able to keep that strong moral compass, is that there needs to be, always checking in with, the spiritual seekers, those that are on the path that can help remind us, our mentors and our teachers, but specifically those that are looking to give us knowledge and dispel kind of illusion and darkness in our life. And that's not every mentor and teacher. And the third is always referring to these wisdom texts. And we talked about how these wisdom texts are books that will help. They're focused on developing compassion and love for all living beings. And then in the middle, we have our inner guide, or that inner voice that's communicating with us. But for me, if I don't have this 3-point system, it's very, very easy to veer off. And as you said, chase what everyone else is chasing. And when I say very often, for me, it's a daily, endeavor to reconnect with these things, because again, the mind is exposed to so many things in the course of a day. So at least that's my, that's not just my kind of sharing from my own personal experience, but it's definitely the suggested, way for those of us on this journey, is to constantly have touch with these 3, points of contacts on a regular basis to help us, remind us again, like this book, like at the time of death, everything goes. So, when we're amassing, we shouldn't be chasing wealth just to amass. It should be used for the benefit of others. I think even just simple reminders like this will hopefully help us bring us back to what's important. So just some initial thoughts, but a question we can, you and I can definitely talk more about, because it's a really good one. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments that they want to share? Please, Tiffany.
It's with the Jenny's, I think the whole concept of checking in. And I think if we reflect on these things, so if we reflect on our work that we do, am I rising? Am I, is it the capitalism? Is that what's pushing me? But I think it's just, as long as we keep coming back to the reflection, that will help us remain conscious. Because we're just going to become more aware, and then that will help to guide you. At the end of the day, I like to say, well, I have my gratitude for what went well. And then I say, well, what are some things that I need a little bit of work on? And then if we can take those questions and stay in that mode, because we're not going to have all the answers overnight, but we just have to maintain that level of awareness with this. Like you said, Rikin, you know, if we don't have a program for our mind every day, our mind is going to be programmed. We're going to be led down an alternate path. But if we come back to center and just always keep coming back, like we've talked about that, the middle ground before, then that will keep us on this path and this path of growth.
Yeah, and Tiffany, this process you talk about of reflection, it's an active process that requires work and effort, right? It's not something that always comes maybe natural to us, and sometimes we're pushed, like the life pushes us in that direction to reflect because things are out of balance, right? But we should try to do it even as a maintenance part of our life rather than just when we're pushed, when things get out of balance. So it's such this point on reflection for the purpose of remaining conscious. It's really important. And I think, again, that 3-pointed system that we pointed out, that's there. Those 3 things are there to help us reflect, right? Because sometimes we don't even know what our blind spots are. We don't even know what, maybe what direction we should be heading in, but that continuous, openness of the heart to be able to bring in things that can be helpful to us, even sometimes if difficult or painful, is really important. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. Anyone else in closing wanted to share anything? Livia is saying, where the level of consciousness is elevated to the point on which all humans reach their full potential for empathy in oneness. So she's answering.
So I was responding to Ajani because he said what is meant by a utopic environment. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just not within this dimension, not without help from other guides.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think the point here, Olivia, that you bring up is so much that we shouldn't think of ourselves in isolation, that we can do it on our own. We all of us, we need help. I wanted to point out Ajani's comment that he had made from someone we'd heard in the past, Rasnath. He's spoken to the Titans in the past, but he says here that the first thing to understand from the perspective of the Vedas is that any systems like capitalism, like democracy, are helpful systems, as long as people working within those systems are working at a certain level of consciousness. So again, coming back to the point that Tiffany made on just, relentlessly, it is a relentless practice of just trying to be conscious, because so easily the mind will go into autopilot. And I'll speak for myself here. Toro?
So in terms of this third aspect, environment, so just recently I had a parent who had to be put in the hospital and is going through rehab. And it's really incredible to see how little in terms, it's very difficult to get away from the materialism, capitalism of our daily lives. I think it's almost become, unfortunately, it's almost like an innate thing. And we would try to get away from it. But what I did see is it's incredible how little you actually need. Sometimes you don't realize until all of these things are sort of in a way taken away from you. It was taken away, not by force, but because of the circumstance. And so to see how little you actually need to go through your daily life and to have the simple things that you barely need anything. And it's just a matter of practice. And that's what it takes, I think. It's just practice of being able to find your true self, find your inner strength, to not need all of the possessions and the materialistic things that we do come to use and have on a daily basis.
Yeah, simplifying is such an important practice. It means, continuously looking at what we have and say, okay, how can we declutter? What can we let go of? And yeah, it's such a great point, Toral, it requires so much. We need a roof over our head. We need a bed to sleep on. We need some food. And most importantly, we need connection of those of like-minded people to give and receive love, because that is, as we've said, the dharma of the soul is to always, give and receive, right? But, these simple things, there's so many other extra things. You're right, it can complicate things, but we're able to sustain ourselves on so little. It's a wonderful, realization to have, and that comes sometimes, when we see other people potentially, before us, especially our parents, sometimes, they're having to face situations in their life where they no longer are able to maintain the same things that they have, but hopefully can still be happy. So. All right, everyone, we're at the time end. Oh, what a really great discussion today. And I thank everyone for joining us, and we will we'll connect with everyone next week. For those that haven't, we have Stacy that signed up for the retreat. Hopefully Tiffany's signing up for the retreat soon. And yeah, we have the retreat that we're organizing November 4th to November 8th. And if you're able to come, it'd be great to have you. We have the full now kind of itinerary planned out that I'll be sharing shortly. So thanks, everyone. We'll see everyone next week.
Thanks, Ricken.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care.